After 13 years of using Android, I finally switched over to an iPhone. In this video, I'll walk through why I switched over to iOS and why it's actually a scary sign for the whole industry. First, you have to understand, I was a true believer in Android. I got my first ever smartphone in 2011, halfway through college. It was a Droid Bionic, and I have a distinct memory of sitting outside the dining hall at Stanford and taking my first ever selfie with a 640 pixel front camera. As I became a better programmer, I started to develop apps, and I eventually published almost 10 apps to the Play Store. Later in my career, I developed Android apps professionally at companies like Pinterest and Meta. And I started this YouTube channel for Android. In fact, the first 100 videos were all about Android tutorials before I shifted over talking about career growth and Taro. In many ways, I had tied my identity to Android. So it would take something really big for me to switch over to iPhone, right? Turns out that really big thing was actually something really small. Was I a green or blue bubble when messaging other people? Apple's messaging lock-in is what finally led me to pull the trigger and convert. Quick background, if you don't know, Apple has their own proprietary messaging system called iMessage. If you're on an Android device, you are sending messages through an inferior protocol called SMS, and you show up as a green bubble when you text someone on iPhone. SMS is a very old protocol which can't handle end-to-end encryption, it can't do high-quality image or video, and can't do things like typing indicators. A newer protocol called RCS started gaining steam in 2018 to address the shortcomings of SMS, but at this point, iMessage is too deeply ingrained among iPhone users for them to switch over. The scale of iMessage is shocking. At peak times, the company is handling 200,000 messages every second. The maddening reality of the situation is that there's absolutely no technical reason why Apple makes the iMessage protocol only available to iPhone. They simply want to degrade the experience for everyone who is not on iPhone. Back at Meta, I worked with someone who had joined from Apple as a rare Android developer from the company. He told me that Apple had a team build out a fully functional iMessage client for Android, but then when it got to executive review, it got killed because the ecosystem lock-in is way too valuable for the company. Over time, this had an increasingly negative impact on my life. I live in California, where most of my friends are 30-somethings who are in or adjacent to tech, and the iPhone is completely dominant. I'd say 90% of my friends have an iPhone. As a result, almost all the communication happens through iMessage. And once your group is established, it's really hard to migrate them to WhatsApp or Messenger or Signal or any of the other dozens of messaging apps out there. It literally got to the point where we would go on trips and I would be deliberately excluded from the group chat as the only Android user. And then I would have to rely on my wife, who has an iPhone, for information and updates. As you can imagine, this is a pretty big pain point for a lot of people like me, and a lot of startups have been created to try and fix compatibility between iMessage and Android. In 2023, a former YC partner, Eric Migihovsky, created an app called Beeper. They hired a 16-year-old genius programmer who reverse engineered the iMessage protocol, and for a glorious few days, I was able to send messages as a blue bubble from my Android. You can tell there was an enormous demand for this functionality because the Beeper mini app was downloaded more than 100,000 times in 2 days when the word got out. But it came to an abrupt end when Apple shut it down. The US DOJ, Department of Justice, used this incident to trigger an antitrust investigation into Apple for consumer harm and monopolistic behavior. But given how slow our legal system is, this is going to take years to resolve. And keep in mind, messaging lock-in is incredibly important to Apple to get people like me to convert. And so they're more than happy to spend billions of dollars in legal fees to find loopholes and drag out the process to protect how valuable iMessage is for them. And so that is how we have come to this day, which I never expected. I now own an iPhone 16 Pro Max. I've been using it every day for the past month. I'll end by quickly sharing my reflections about what I like or don't like about iPhone. It might be helpful if you are considering the switch from Android to iPhone, or if you have been an Apple lifer and you want to get the outside perspective from someone who's brand new. What I like about iPhone, first, obviously, is iMessage. Not being excluded from groups is pretty nice. I can use all the rich functionality in iMessage and also message from my computer, which is pretty nice. And that's the second thing. The integration between my Mac and my iPhone is nice. So for example, if I set Do Not Disturb, DND, it'll automatically set that on the other device. Next is a really good battery life. I think it's more than 20 hours of video playback on one charge. And so I've actually gone more than 2 days without charging my iPhone. It's been totally fine. And finally, charging. So recently, I forget which version, but iPhone now has USB-C charging, which is the same as most Android devices. And in fact, also the same as what you can charge your MacBook with. And so I have one charger for my computer, my iPhone. I didn't have to buy anything new when I made the transition. What I don't like about iPhone, the biggest annoyance I found so far is that the back behavior between apps is really confusing. To go from one screen to another, it is sometimes a left to right swipe, it's sometimes hitting a button, sometimes you have to swipe something down. I found it to be really non-intuitive, which is ironic because I thought that everything on iPhone is supposed to have the best UX. Next, I have found that dismissing notifications on my iPhone is a lot harder compared to Android, where I could easily flick them away. Third, one of the things I have found really annoying about iMessage is that you can't turn off notifications for message reaction. And so either you can turn off notifications for the whole thread, which I don't want to do, or if you're in a group, someone might go back a week or a month ago, react to something, and then you get spammed with a ton of notifications that are not that valuable to you. Finally, I found that the keyboard on the iPhone is really not that good. You have to hit a button in order to get to punctuation, and I think the spell check is kind of stupid. For example, I was trying to abbreviate NYC, I accidentally typed MYC, and it wouldn't autocorrect it to NYC. And on the other end, it's sometimes too aggressive about auto-correcting. So for example, I tried to write co-work, like I asked a friend if he wanted to co-work with me, and it corrected that to cower. And so my friend received a message saying he would cower in fear with me, which is not what I wanted to say. I have begrudgingly become an iPhone user, even though I hate how Apple is deliberately making the cross-platform messaging experience worse. Software should make things easier, faster, cheaper, not harder. I'd love your help to adapt to the iPhone world. Drop a comment with your favorite tip or app that I should take a look at. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.